Good evening and thank you all for joining us. The worlds of beauty, health and wellness have always thrived on change and trends and pivots, and haven't we had an enormous dose of those this year? 2020 has really challenged the way brands operate and communicate, the way they retail, market and continue to innovate. But imagine launching your brand in the middle of a global pandemic, stuck on the other side of the world from your supplier, all your stock, your retailer and your largest customer base. And then doing all of that through months of strict Melbourne lockdown. Maeva, obviously I'm talking to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That actually sounds like the definition of a startup nightmare, if we're honest. But it was, in fact, your launch reality for your hair care brand, Bread Beauty Supply, back in July. Now, you'd been through the Sephora Accelerate Incubation Program, and I think you were the first Australian brand to do that. You no doubt had a very considered launch plan and some great mentors to tap into. But how did you very quickly adapt that launch plan to weather the very challenging conditions that no one could have forecast?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it was a massive challenge. And to give a little bit of context, we have a hair care brand designed specifically for textured and curly hair. We launched this year in July with Sephora USA, which was, a huge accomplishment. But again, in the worst circumstances in the middle of a global pandemic. So it was a massive challenge. And we kind of, when that happened, it was all in the midst of us working towards a launch where we already had a very limited time frame to get everything ready and to be ready to launch on time with Sephora. And so then we had to layer on all of these operational challenges where, China was the first to shut down and we couldn't get our samples produced to be approved. And then once that started kind of easing a little bit more, then everybody else went into lockdown and we could get the samples produced, but we couldn't get them into the country to approve. And it was just layer upon layer of kind of logistics challenges. But I think in the end, I guess what we just kept coming back to is what we can control and deciding if, it made sense for us to continue on and barrel forward with the launch as intended. And I'm glad we did in the end. And we basically, we went through this very challenging time, but I guess the blessing in all of that was that it really developed our resilience as a company and as a team. And it really kind of showed us what's possible, having gone through this and not many brands and founders will have gone through this in their lifetime and launching right in that peak of the pandemic kind of almost gives us a leg up in terms of the resilience that we've built. And so it was great to see once your back up is up against the wall, like what you can actually achieve. And so it was all about just knowing what we could control and doing our very best to control that and just keep pushing forward and just touching base every day and sense checking whether this is still the right way to go and just overcoming those challenges and knowing that every single day was going to be a fight and that we had made the decision to continue and that was our reality and really sit in that reality and move forward.
Very positive attitude too. What must have been a really scary situation. Was there a point when you didn't think the launch would or could actually happen? And what did you lean on or who did you lean on to get through that time to just push forward or, as you said, barrel forward and keep your eye on the launch focus?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, every single day was like a quick check to see, like, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? There was something new every 24 hours. And so it was an ongoing thing. And I think what I learned on most of all was, we had great mentors and we had great, business minds advising us and all of those things, but not a lot of those people had gone through what we were going through. And
let's face it, no one's gone through that, have they?
No. So it was a unique challenge and, you can have all the business experience in the world, but at the end of the day, I think in a circumstance like this, a lot of it is internal. And so the tools that I relied on were internal and kind of, evaluating the way that I wanted to approach things. Business is always going to be putting out fires every single day.
Yep.
It's actually not that fun. It really is just challenge after challenge after challenge. And if you know that and you go into things knowing that that's going to be your reality, it's much easier to kind of overcome things because you realize that you're not alone. You realize that mistakes are going to happen. There's going to be really, really hard days. And just knowing that other people have gone through those things, even though it might not be exactly the challenge that we were facing, I knew that if we just kept going, we would get to the other side. And regardless of what happened, we'd still be able to get to a point that I'd be happy with, and that, success is always just one challenge or failure away. Just moving forward and relying on, what I could control and what I knew internally, what we were trying to achieve. Relying on myself, and also support systems that are not necessarily business focused. So my partner, who's been a massive support and brings me down to earth very quickly, and close friends that I get to chat to on the daily in the Instagram DMs, and thank goodness for technology throughout all of this.
Absolutely. Well done on that.
Thank you.
Laura, on the bright side of COVID, with gyms closed and everyone at home 24/7 in a sourdough banana bread spiral, that's had to have had a phenomenal impact on your health and wellness digital platform, Keep It Cleaner. But were you ready for that kind of growth? And how did you quickly adapt to meet the demands of so many more subscribers who were hungrier than ever for workouts, meditation, yoga, and recipes at home?
Yeah, so we have had an incredible growth, and that kind of happened in the first round of isolation, and then the second round. When the first round of isolation came, I mean, the fitness space is really saturated, especially the online fitness space now. And so we wanted to be at the front of everyone's minds. We didn't just want to rely on the fact that people would need online fitness. So we'll just, hope they come to us. We launched a live gym in the first week of ISO, and we did 2 free workouts. Steph and I took them via the Instagram, which was such an easy, didn't cost us anything. It was and it was giving back because it was free content for people that, weren't able to afford to go to they couldn't go to their gym, or they couldn't afford to sign up to anything. And we love doing that. And that's kind of what Kick's all about. But it also gave people a taste of what Keep It Cleaner was. And I think what a lot of people struggled with is having motivation at home. I mean, it's so hard. Everyone's felt so isolated. But for some, I don't know how and why, because you are still really home by yourself, but the live workouts really gave you like a community feel. And we got a lot of people onto the program after that. And then we were also in the middle of relaunching the entire app into Kick 2.0, which is what it is now. And it's funny, a lot of people thought that we kind of did the relaunch for COVID, but we had already started planning the relaunch last year, and it just happened to be really, really great timing. So we relaunched in August. So it was the second lockdown when we did the relaunch, and we had our biggest growth of subscriptions ever in that week. We were up by 380% from the week before.
That's incredible.
So that was incredible. Yeah, and it's been so awesome. It's been a really good year. This year we actually had planned to go overseas and do quite a few things, but it really, really forced us to do foundation work, which enabled us now when we do go overseas next year, hopefully we've done that work, that base work that we needed to do. So it will really help us for next year, because obviously, as you said, when you grow, it can be hard to kind of maintain the quality of your product, and that is so important to us, and we never kind of want to lose that. So we've been able to do that this year, which has been really, really awesome. And people have been working out at home, which is awesome. I think also with working out at home, a lot of people didn't think that it would be good. Like, people thought they had to go to the gym to get in a really good.
Everyone except Jane Fonda in the 80s.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. But it's been nice to see that people can, even if you only have 20 minutes and no equipment, you can still do something and move your body and feel good.
Yeah, thank God for that. And thank you for keeping us all in our genes. Elle Ferguson, hi.
Hi.
Your brand, Elle Effect, one of my favourite, well, I should say my favourite fake tan, actually. Yeah. You've had an incredible first year. You've launched into Mecca around Australia and New Zealand. You've launched into Selfridges pre-COVID. And also thanks in part to many of us who still consider self-tan to be an essential item.
Yeah.
Our audience would love to know what the process of turning your idea into an actual product was like.
It's really hard. No, in short.
Simple question.
There you go. No, first of all, I have to say that I think with our self-tan, it was always about confidence. So saying it was an essential item for us when we started Elle Effect, well, when I started it, it was never about going to the beach. It was about a personal journey and feeling confident with that tan on. So the process of kind of going from that concept of going, I want to make something, to physically holding it is such a roller coaster of emotions, money, fear. It's every kind of sense you can have. But what people don't realize is just the time that goes into producing a product, and especially a product that goes on your skin, you know what I mean? And the tan was our first product. It was our hero product. I wanted to launch with one product that I felt I had done the very best of to bring to market. And with that, there was 18 months of going back and forth with a chemist. I mean, I tried to do it here in Australia. I really wanted to be Australian owned and Australian manufactured, but knocking on the door of about 7 different manufacturers here, nobody took me seriously. They were like, you're an influencer. You're not a business owner. You're not a female founder. Who are you? Yeah. And I said, well, I have the money to do the sample with you. Please take me seriously. And they said, we'll talk to you in probably 2 years. Put your name on a list. And that didn't work for me, because I saw the pivot in the landscape of the influencer becoming the brand owner. And I wanted to be at the forefront of that. And that's what made me kind of be manufactured in California, because the door that I knocked on over there, they said, do you have the money for the sample? I said, yes, I do. They said, let's go for it. And I mean, there were a lot of challenges in that, because there's a lot of laws and regulations that are different in America than they are in Australia. But I navigated my way through it. And I truly believe that formula is the best formula, because I stuck at it. We went rounds and rounds, and the stability testing that they said, you know, would be 12 weeks. We ended up doing 36 weeks of it. And it's a real roller coaster, but you've just got to keep going, and you've got to keep pushing. And once you get the formula right, then you start on your branding and your bottles and all of that. So I think the best thing is just to keep asking questions and don't take no first for an answer.
Well, you clearly didn't. Everyone wants to start their own beauty brand. So can you give us an indication of, are we talking like 2 years to get from, the initial idea through to launch? Is that what it took you with Elephant?
I would say I was talking and doing 2 years before anybody saw anything. And I think there is something quite amazing in achieving success quietly. And I mean, for me personally, I was hitting a lot of milestones within Elephant quite quietly, so that when I went to market, I knew that product was the best and I had the answers to all the questions. And I think that's really important for people that want to launch brands now. Don't go out and scream all about it straight away. Get your back end right. Make sure the product does what it needs to do, and just take a little time to understand your business.
I think that's great advice, and a bit of a reality check for everybody who thinks that launching a beauty brand is really easy. What's been your biggest challenge this very unusual year that's been 2020?
Well, besides COVID, not many people know about it, but we were going to launch March. In March, we were launching 2 new products. It was a product I'd had in the mix for 18 months, and I was so excited. I'd come back from LA. We were about to launch it, then COVID hit. And the hardest thing was kind of taking that fall and going, we're not launching. It's not right. It doesn't feel right. But then also navigating our way through what COVID was, and then making the decision to actually take the opportunity to go back to our chemists and our manufacturers and going, can we make another formula? Can I launch with 2? So I think what was the hardest also has become the most rewarding, because on the 12th of November, I'm going to be launching with 3 new amazing Elephant products, where in March I would have only launched with 1. So I think in my life, I always try to flip the script. I always try to turn it on its head and look for the opportunity. So where COVID made me kind of go, oh my goodness, I can't do this, but I can do this. And that's been something that's been really exciting and to overcome the challenge.
That's fantastic. Did you find that probably a lot of bigger, more established brands may have sort of stopped everything during COVID in terms of new product development, and with, I guess, that passion to keep going, you maybe slid into places that suddenly became available for you?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest with you, I think a lot of factories, especially in China, things closed. And I think a lot of people freaked out, where I just went with the emails. Do you know what I mean? And was like, do you have an opening? What have you got? And I think
just wore them down, basically.
Pretty much. I think I'm probably referred to as the annoying Australian girl in a lot of factories overseas, but, the result is a positive. Yeah, I think yes, I do think we saw an opportunity and we jumped at it, with a lot of people kind of stopping or rehashing what they had. It has allowed us to get into factories, get in on ships. There were a lot of gaps, but also being at the front and kind of, being aware. China's opening, the UK is opening, let's go for it. I mean, the UK sadly is closing down again, so we're dealing with that, but it's just trying to navigate your way through.
And being tenacious clearly helps.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi.
You launched your online foundation matching tool, Match My Makeup, back when you were actually an IT lawyer in Silicon Valley with your sister, Dr. Van Park. A couple of years later, you then won and were one of the first online tech companies to win an Australian Science Innovation Award. What's been the biggest hurdle that you've had to overcome to get the business all these years later to where it is today?
I think the biggest hurdle for us has been convincing retailers that they need this tool, especially when they don't think that they actually need it. And so you're one of the first in the market. So when you're one of the first in the market, there's no precedence that we can go off. You can't learn from anybody else's mistakes except your own. There's no statistics that you can give any retailers on how much this would benefit their consumers. So you're essentially just pitching with just your gut instinct. And I think the hard part at that time, that was 9 years ago, is that the beauty sales in all the department stores, they were the strongest performing category for them. So there was no urgency for them to move this online. So I remember one of our very first meetings was with a major department store here in Australia.
Who we probably shouldn't name, just by the way.
But there's only two, so one or the other. But so we were pitching to them, and we were pitching this idea to a board of men who looked so confused at what our product was. And in the end, Van and I, we were so frustrated, and we said, "Look, imagine if you scratched your car and you needed touch-up paint. You've finally got a tool now to arrive at the exact color match in a matter of seconds." And then the penny dropped for them and they realized, oh, okay, that's what you do. But then as we finished the meeting, they said to us, you know what, girls, that's a really good concept that you have there, but let's just face it, online sales will never surpass the bricks and mortar stores. And that's what they said 10 years ago.
Wow.
And then,
can I just ask you, did they really call you girls?
They called us girls.
Wow.
And mind you, we're not girls. We're like in our 30s. So, and then over the years, interest just grew in our product. And then online shopping just started to gain more and more traction. And then COVID hit. And what happened was unprecedented. Nobody predicted it. The stores were actually closed. They removed all of the testers overseas. And then our product, we found that our product became, no longer, it was nice to have. It was like a must have. And we just moved up on the priority list. And we've just had our strongest year to date now because it's skyrocketed in demand.
Isn't that fantastic? So a little bit like Laura, the conditions of COVID actually has really benefited your business.
Definitely.
Amazing. Interesting, though, to be with technology especially, you can be too ahead of your time, can't you? Has that been really frustrating for you with you and Van having this vision for this amazing tool that's based on scientific and mathematical data to help women find their perfect foundation match? Has that been frustrating, just all these years going by and not having the conversion that you'd originally hoped for?
Well, it's perseverance, because the thing is, you see things that might be ahead of your time. And when the world's not ready for it, you just have to keep going because you can see it. And it is extremely frustrating, Lucinda. Like, you hear so many no's, and I know Elle, Laura, and Maeva, like they hear me, but you hear so many no's. And when you're naturally shy and introverted at the beginning, you take it quite personally, and you don't know how to proceed, but then you just build on it, and the passion kind of overrides all of this, shyness, and you just, like what Elle said, you just keep going. And so I think if Elle was known as the annoying Australian girl, I'm known as the Energizer Bunny. I just keep going. So that's it is. I mean, to answer your question, extremely frustrating.
Yeah, but again, tenacity keeps shining through as one of the qualities that you all have, clearly. and that have got you where you have gotten today. Maeva, back to you. You've had phenomenal success in just a couple of months, really. So Bread is now in 110 Sephora stores across the US. Hopefully they're all going to stay open. And of course, online. We've got an audience question for you about what has really helped you build your brand awareness.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of it has been driven by PR and the press surrounding the launch. And I would say that that's a combination of a few things, but in terms of like a tangible takeaway that other people could apply to their own business that they're thinking about launching or that may be coming up. And I don't think it really matters who you are or what your kind of story is in building that brand. Everyone has a story. It's just about crafting it in the right way to make it interesting for media to want to talk about it. And so for us, I mean, like our story is factual, but it's not the whole story. You know, there were hundreds of other days and hours and weeks in between that narrative that we have for our brand story and how everything came to be that just aren't interesting to the narrative and don't form part of just a really interesting story grab. And so I think one thing that you can do, especially if you're doing a DIY and you want to get press, is like really hone in on what your unique story is and pull out those tidbits and create a narrative that makes what you're doing different and really interesting to talk about. And that's how you get cut through for free. If you are talking to press and you want to approach press on your own and kind of build that buzz, which I think is the doors are wide open now, especially in COVID and everyone's online. And I think especially if you are building something now that you haven't launched, I'm sure there are plenty of kind of behind the scenes stories that you can kind of bring to the forefront and make your journey super interesting and something that people want to talk about. So I think that was a big part of how we've been able to build a lot of buzz. And then of course, there's other things that layer into that are harder to replicate, which is, one, timing, our unique proposition in the market and all of those things. But yeah, I would say that's a really great way to kind of go about it, especially now with people online and people wanting to consume more content and read more stories and hear about people's journeys more than ever.
That's such great advice for people that, probably put off by the fact that maybe they don't have a budget for PR and they think it's also hard to get the coverage, but to actually hustle and really put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's about having like one major piece of press and then you get that snowball effect? Or what was your approach with regard to press?
Yeah, I think yes and no, because I think sometimes you can go out and you can get one piece of major press and then it can maybe kind of like whittle down. I think it's just about having a compelling story and more people wanting to kind of like dig into it a little bit more. And I guarantee everyone's got something. It's just about, being confident enough or just being okay with being vulnerable about it. If there's something that you want to share about your story and not necessarily going to market with a super glossy, perfect narrative about how things came to be, because people want you to be relatable as well. And people can relate to struggle because, I mean, let's face it, we're all struggling in 2020 especially. Yeah. So our approach was really just to put the story out there and speak to as many editors and outlets as possible and make sure that story is compelling. And I truly do believe that it's not necessarily about just having that one anchor piece. It comes down to the narrative and communicating it well.
What's been your biggest high point of 2020? You've had a few, and it's only early days for the brand, but what would be the one high point that you're particularly proud of or are celebrating?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had a few, which is weird to say in this year, but I think that our major one, aside from, the Sephora launch, was securing investment. We secured a sort of pre-seed investment before we had our product finalized, before the launch, which is really hard to do for a beauty brand. And so that was a massive, massive feat that we managed to kind of get in right before, in the midst of actually a lot of things happening, with an amazing investment partner that I really never expected in my wildest dreams would be who we would end up with. It was certainly something.
Could you share that with the audience, because they are the rock stars of investment right now?
They are, yeah. So it's Imaginary Ventures, and they're based in New York, and their portfolio is very beauty and fashion heavy. It was created by Nick and also Natalie, and Natalie's one of the co-founders of Net-a-Porter. And so their portfolio, they have a bunch of brands. They have Glossier in their portfolio. They have Good American, some really cool Kosas, really cool beauty brands, and deep expertise in that space. And they've been amazing and helped us bring in a bunch of incredible angel investors as well to the round. Emma Greed from Good American, one of the co-founders of Toucher. So we've got some amazing people in our corner.
Great portfolio too. Fantastic.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, which is really exciting for us. And that was absolutely the highlight of the year, I would say, even though I don't really remember it, to be honest. There was so much going on. And people are saying, oh, what happened at that moment? I'm like, I actually don't remember. I was probably like, okay, what next? Let's go. We need to get moving.
These are great problems to have, just PS, Maeva.
Yeah.
You can't remember it all. Finding the right investor is really like high stakes dating. I mean, what did you learn from this experience of seeking and securing such an incredible investment partner and partners that you could share with brands that are looking to get investment?
Yeah, so many things, especially when you're going through this for the first time. There are so many things that you learn that you're like well equipped to go into the next raise with. But one of the things that I guess happened was that everything kind of happened the way that people say it will. And I had read a lot about fundraising and what the process is, and ultimately kind of how to play the game, which sounds, really gross, but essentially it is. And I'd read a lot about this FOMO piece where, investors want to get in on a hot deal. And once you're a hot deal, the floodgates open, and that's truly what happened. And I'd been trying for a really long time to get an investor, just one, to say yes. You just need one. And once we got that one, which was Imaginary, it was the floodgates opened up, and we went
blood in the water.
Oh yeah, we went from trying to just push a rock up a hill to we're running down the hill and the rock is coming behind us, because we have to start saying no to people. And a lot of people say that that's how it works, and that is essentially what ended up happening. But I think that one of the other things that I learned, which is a great takeaway and a good one if you don't want to waste time, is you'll know when an investor is in. When I spoke to Imaginary, that conversation that I had with them, once I had that conversation, I was like, oh, so that's what it sounds like when you're going to get to a yes. And there are a lot of other conversations I'd had before that where I thought we were getting to a yes. And I look back now and realize, oh, actually, I can see there were certain questions that investors would ask, and you start to develop patterns, and you get to a point where you hear that question, and I know if I hear that question that's not going to be the right investor. And so you just have to learn on the fly and as you go, and people can tell you these things, but I mean it doesn't really sink in until you're in it. But that's one of the things, and I think you just have to develop that muscle of, okay, this person's not necessarily wasting my time, but this is going to be much harder to get to a yes, versus that conversation I had where it felt more like they were already in, they were just asking questions that were going to get us to a place where we were on the same page in terms of strategy. And it sounded like they were willing to come to the table with me in terms of what that would look like, versus conversations with other investors where it sounded more like they were trying to find an out. So that's
very much like dating, I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
Victoria, you and your sister Van were also successful in securing investment. Did you get some great advice going into that process, or did you really have to learn on the fly?
We learnt on the fly. I really wish I had spoken to Maeva before that, because
I think everyone wants to speak to Maeva right now.
Well, what you said, Maeva, really resonated with me. And I just went, oh my goodness, that is exactly what happened to us. When you're out there, you put yourself out there to get this investment, and all you hear is no, and you don't know where else to go. You put your heart on your sleeve, really, and you're out there. And then when the minute there is a yes, the floodgates opened. It is exactly what you've just said, Maeva, but nobody told me that before. So I literally just learnt. And then when I heard Maeva talk about it, I went, oh my goodness, that is the exact same thing that happened to us. So what we've learnt, though, is to treat it like an interview process, because you're looking for the right fit. and you're looking for the right fit for both of you. So they're looking for a fit for them, you're looking for a fit for you. And at the beginning, you're so excited when the first person says yes, because you've heard so many no's before. And, it's so tempting just to go and accept it right away because you're so excited. But then there's just so many different types of investment firms, and there's so many different ways that they invest in your company. So, there's just lots of little different iterations on how somebody would want to invest into your company. So you've really got to take the time to kind of make sure that your core values kind of align, because it's almost like entering into a family, or like you say, Lucinda, like a relationship, because once they're in, and it means they're going to be with you to the very end. And, it's a more time and costly experience to kind of get them out if.
Yes, of course. So what would be one piece of advice that you would give to brand founders or entrepreneurs who are wanting to get investment? If you think there's one thing that's the most important piece of advice.
It's to get yourself out there. Like, you actually have to mingle. And
So it's networking.
It's networking. And I'm coming from a point where I am the shyest person that you'll ever meet in the world. And it's so hard to put yourself out there and want to go out and talk to these people and sell yourself. And it's not a natural thing for, I think, any of us to go out and talk yourself up, because you kind of have this little self-doubt in your head that makes you think that, you're sounding a little bit too, full of yourself if you're selling yourself all the time. But then you realize it comes naturally. Like, you really have to get yourself out there if you want investment. There's nobody is going to find you if you're, locked away there and you keep thinking that you can do it by yourself, because sometimes you can't. You really need that little bit of funding there to get you going.
Right. Thank you. So drive, I would say, resilience, and not accepting the word no seem to be standard operating procedures for entrepreneurs. I'm going to ask all of you now, what signature superpower do you have, or that you've learnt recently that you have, that's helped you not just get through 2020, but the many different phases of your business? And I'm going to throw to Laura to answer first.
So I think for me, it's probably resilience is the number one. And I think it's something that everyone here definitely has. You can't run your own business unless you're resilient. And I think the thing that I've learned the most is, you think when you grow, it will get easier. When we grow, we won't have these issues. When we grow, things won't go wrong. When you grow, things go so wrong, and the consequences are just so much bigger, and you can fall so much more. And I think that's something that we've just had to, like, I'm so lucky to have my amazing business partner Steph, that we can get through it together. But resilience is so important. You're locked in a house and the doors are locked. You have to find another way to get out. You can't just say, oh, there's no doors, I can't get out. You've got to go through the floors. You just have to. Every problem has a solution, but sometimes it takes longer to find it than others, and the more you grow, the longer it takes. But you just have to keep persevering, and just be so resilient, because things will be thrown at you every single day.
Elle,
Yes.
what's your signature superpower?
I'm going to say my superpower is flipping the script. So if I get a no, I'm going to make it a yes. I think it's similar to what Laura said. It's just finding a way. You know what I mean? I remember getting 20,000 bottles with the wrong label on them. And I was like, I'm going to make flipping that script. I'm going to make those 20,000 bottles work for me. You know what I mean? So I think that's my superpower, being able to get out of a situation and making it a positive.
Fantastic. And Maeva?
I think my superpower, it's hard to describe, but it's something that an old boss actually said to me once, which is that making like cool things happen in a way where I love kind of like connecting dots between like people and opportunities, and like doing things in spite of what you think is possible. I think if you look at statistics and if you look at the probabilities of things, it can be very off-putting to even try something. Like the stats in the US for raising venture for Black female founders, I think it's 0.06% is the latest number. That's how much venture funding goes to Black female founders. And I think for female founders overall, it's about 2%. You look at that and you think, why even bother?
Yeah.
But I think for me, like I've always been this way. I look at those sort of numbers and I think, okay, but what about the 2%? Like who's going to be that 2%? I don't know what the business statistic is, whether it's like 99% of businesses fail or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, what about that other 1%? Like, what if you could be that? And if you don't actually try it, you'll never know. And I think a lot of things in life where you think about, oh, what an outlandish idea. And that's so like big and far beyond. But if the worst that can happen is that someone says no, or you don't get that opportunity, like what have you got to lose? And imagine the possibility if it actually happens. And so, yeah, I don't know how I would explain that in a word, but just like making cool things happen.
Yeah, that's good enough for me. I'm seeing so much nodding across this panel as you were talking, by the way. Victoria, what's your superpower?
Mine's perseverance, without a doubt. Like, it's like what I said, the Energizer Bunny, through all the really tough times, like when there's no money and it's just you doing everything, or when you've made really bad decisions and you've lost a really big client and you've just got to deal with it. Things like that. You've just got to go through things that when you're not good at doing things, like we're not going to be the best, I don't know, public speakers or, going out there pitching, but you've just got to do it. So there's things that are essential to your business that you've just got to get through it. You persevere through it. You don't have to be great every time, but you just have to do it. And I think that's the thing for me. That's what I just do. I just kind of take a deep breath, jump right in, feel super uncomfortable, and then, but just do it. And then once you've got it done, you've done it, you just like, it's almost like an achievement and you feel so great about it, but it's just perseverance. You've just got to get through it.
Fantastic. We've just had an audience question come through, which I'm going to pose to Laura and Elle. Being front and centre as the faces and bodies of your respective brands must bring with it some particular challenges. The audience question is, what advice do you have for dealing with criticism from other women?
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, absolutely. Go, Elle.
I think, yes, it does come, and it's sad that it actually still does come in 2020 that other women like to pull other women down. It's not a nice place to be. But I think every time I kind of get a little bit of negative, I like to flip it over and make it a positive and see what other women I can support. And I think especially, Laura I see her name come up in my orders all the time, and I always message her and I'm like, why didn't you just ask for it? And she's like, no, I want to support you. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do is change it. You know what I mean? Let's stop it and change it. And especially, like us women sitting here on this panel, we have the influence to make the change. So we need to be lifting other women up with us, not bringing them down. And the more of us that come together to lift each other up, the other ones won't be around. You know what I mean? There's no space for them here anymore.
Yeah, fantastic. That's such a great approach. What about you, Laura? How do you deal with criticism from other women?
So I think you have to believe in yourself. I think it starts within. If you don't believe in yourself, those voices become so loud and you can't control your own narrative because you believe them. And so that's kind of the number one thing. You have to surround yourself with people that, that really, really believe in you as well. But I think what I've learned with criticism in general, it's just that you can't expect everyone to like you. Like if you think of all the most famous people that are doing, amazing things, not everyone likes them, and that's okay. And I think, there might be, if you have 100 followers, one person that doesn't like you, but then as you grow and you get to, 100,000 followers or 1 million or whatever it might be, the number of that small 1% actually becomes, quite a few people. And I think it's just important to remember that and remember why you're doing it when we ever get, anyone trying to bring us down, if it could be a male or female or anyone, I just always remember why we do what we do. And I think, I could take that feedback on and stop what I'm doing right now, but that's not going to help anyone. With our podcast, we've had some of the things that people write in are just like, and especially as often women will phrase it, and I can tell it's a woman by the name, in things like, oh, I think you're really great, but I just don't think this is for you, and I think you should stop and just go back to, doing something else. And even if it's framed in a compliment sandwich, it's not a compliment. But I think, if I stop right now and listen to you, I wouldn't make the impact. So you just have to remember why you're doing what you're doing, and that will always get you through and kind of enable you to just control that narrative in your head and not listen to all the voices, because there's so many of them.
Amazing. That's such a great note to end on. So inspiring. And I want to thank all of you so much for being so open and so generous with your advice. I know you've inspired so many would-be brand founders and female entrepreneurs this evening. We could talk to you for hours, but the big boss is about to come on, so we've got to get off. But thanks again, and talk to you soon, hopefully.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.